It doesn't mean they collude together to try and screw everyone. It means they have to compete. And competition is good. I know we like to teach everyone in the school, you sort of sit there and don't work harder than the other person or whatever else. Quite frankly, that's bullshit. The best thing to do is compete. There's no way to have an egalitarian society. I don't care if you're born as a 4'8" guy in China, you're not going to be an American basketballer. I don't care what the government does to help you, it ain't happening. There's no 4'8" guy in China is going to jump 6 foot in the air from the ground and suddenly slam dunk something. Ain't happening. That's the reality of what our society is. We love to think about these things, and Dash and all these other types of coins start with things like master nodes and all the rest so that everyone can run their own node. Bitcoin's not about running your own node. You don't need to go out there and validate every transaction. You don't need to revalidate the transaction. That's a lie people have been told. Once you've checked a block, if you want to check a block, it is the same block for eternity. If the hash doesn't change, there hasn't been a change. It's that simple. So this idea that you need to check and recheck and download the blockchain again and verify everything again, it's absolute bullshit. There's no other way to put it. I mean, and then saying that everyone needs to check everything, which again is BS. Miners don't collude to try and get bad blocks in. Miners compete, and in competing, they try and basically beat every other miner. Miners don't want to try and get bad blocks. They want to try and find bad blocks so that they can basically knock another miner off and take the reward that the other miner would have got. That's how the system works. It is competitive. Now, if we look at societies and parts of society that are competitive, we see gains, even if they're small and incremental. If we think about the Olympics, no one sits there together and goes up and says, I don't want to run too fast because I think Spain's not doing so well, or whatever else. You compete, and everyone is happy with the fact that we've competed our best. Even if you come second or third or whatever else, people don't sort of sit there and complain. It's about competition at its finest. That's what Bitcoin should be about. Now, the idea then of running a node, you don't actually do anything by running a node. There's no signal sent out telling the rest of the network that you block something. You have no way of doing anything to stop anything. So the best, if you don't agree with what miners are doing, you just may as well turn your machine off because you actually don't do anything more. Now, that's the key. No one needs to run a node unless they're mining. If you don't need to run a node, you don't need to spend the money, don't. This idea that we're helping the network by running nodes is just wrong. This division of the network so that we have in master nodes and whatever else is wrong. The idea is it would be great if we had banks and countries running Bitcoin, because they would subsidize cash for the rest of society. Let them pay for everything. Let them help the poor in places like India, Pakistan, Africa generally actually have cash, and let big corporates subsidize the world. That's what we should be looking at.
Yeah, cool. Hold on. Well, we'll come to you after. Yep, Ron?
Hi, g'day, Craig. Big fan of your work. Thanks for your contributions. So,
can you hear him, Craig?
I can, yes.
So we've had a freely floating fiat monetary system for quite some time now, almost 100 years, or at least since the 70s, right? And it's taken, if you even go back to Henry Ford, he talked about if the masses and if the people knew about how the banking system worked, they'd be riding the streets on their own. what is the message, or is it realistic that we can actually spread a message over the next couple of years that can help trigger wider adoption of this? Because just like this question, it's quite hard to explain the system as it stands as the status quo, and then also what could be with a decentralized cash system and how it could create a completely different society. So it's quite a complex topic, and for me, I find it quite challenging to educate people about this without raising all kinds of red flags and concerns that they frankly don't even know they have. For example, you can look at consumer price index and substitutable goods, and even how the measuring stick for the economy of hey, that's totally bogus. So what I'm saying is it's a very complex situation, the status quo at the moment. How I think is the most efficient way to let this thing grow over the next couple of years, and what are some of the key master strokes in your strategy that you see as essential, which haven't happened yet, that must happen in order to reach global adoption? Because there's a lot of incumbent paradigms and business systems with a lot of power who quite clearly don't want this to happen. Have a look at Microsoft. Some of the
Okay, we have to move away from the idea that everyone needs to run a node. That's really flawed for a start. People just need a wallet. They need to protect their own private keys. That is where people should be developing. We're investing in a number of companies. We've already invested in CentB and a few others. The idea is to get companies who make wallets that are robust, that are easy. Now, when you get a wallet that is as intuitive and easy as something like Twitter or Facebook to use, where I can get a picture of grandma and she can send me back money or whatever else, and I can understand and see the person and not need to worry about any of the cryptography or keys or anything else, then it starts to work. What people seem to think is everyone needs to learn how cryptographic primitives work. They don't. You don't need to know how SSL3 works and the difference between TLS 1.2 and SSL3, the flaws with MD5 and SHA-1 versus SHA-256, the difference between SHA-512 and why SHA-3 algorithms are sort of able to defend against certain types of attacks. None of that matters. These are techie problems. We're creating plumbing. At the end of the day, what the big problem is we're creating plumbing and we're selling pipes. People don't care. People just want it working. So we have to give them solutions that just work. So we're doing a push into places like Africa this year, into India this year, into whatever else, where there is a need for this. And that'll start bringing people on, and use in the Philippines, use in these sort of global markets, even if the amounts are small, will start people using global international currency. Add to that when we have the idea of simpler wallets. If we stop the notion of everyone needing to run a home node or anything like that, and start thinking miners and exchanges need nodes, users need a really simple, intuitive wallet, and start people developing those, then it becomes easy. When it becomes something that is intuitive and easy and you don't need to understand, that's when you have a chance of actually getting it to the masses. I know people love to say how wouldn't it be great if everyone understood all the technology? But the reality is people don't want to understand the technology. They don't want to understand how the electric motor or the alternator or anything like that in their car actually works. They don't want to know coil designs. They don't want to understand the different materials used in brakes. They don't want to understand how carbon fiber is produced. When they buy a car, they want to drive. They don't want to sit there and understand it. There are a few of us who are gearheads and love their cars. I'm one. But the rest of us don't care. And that's what we've got to get as a message. I mean, it's great. It's exciting technology. us geeks may love it. But at the end of the day, Facebook is exciting technology and no one cares. No one cares that Facebook and Microsoft work together to put a 160 terabyte a second cable across the Atlantic in September. No one cares that Google is doing the same. No one cares about the routing algorithms that Google is creating. No one cares about companies like Alchemy. Alchemy putting or have cache engines around the world. They were one of the early search engines that lost. And what their pivot was is creating a whole lot of cache servers that sat around the globe so that when you go to Facebook or something like that, there's near instant sort of access to pictures. People don't actually want to know. What they want is a nice, simple, sexy UI that they can trust because it's secure, that they know they won't lose their money, that they have something that actually works, and that's it. More than that, who cares? So actually creating what the consumers want, that's when they start to adopt.
Yep. Cool.
I'm up the back of the room. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Craig, can you hear?
No, I can't, sorry.
Yeah, you might want to, come up.
I can relocate. Hey, how you going? So further to what you're saying, I couldn't agree more. I think the analogy of, like people like to drive cars, they don't need to know how to build a car. It's very much the case. And, as far as creating a usable interface and all that sort of stuff, I think that really is key. Further to that point, we were discussing this a moment before we got online. I'm of the opinion that the first of the cryptocurrencies that really does integrate into a card, like an FPOS card or like a debit card, is going to have a huge impact in the market, and certainly in terms of their market share, they'll be adopted by a lot of people. Is Bitcoin Cash leading in that area? Because I know there's one ICO that's coming up that's done some deal with Canadian Visa Card. It was announced last year. They're still not even launched, but is Bitcoin Cash going to be quick with that sort of creating that kind of thing, or is it something else? Is it like a smart card or something, or what are your thoughts on that?
I know there are a couple things actually happening. There are simple wallets that'll integrate near-field communications. So you'll have the equivalent of like a Apple Pay or Android Pay type tap. There will be other devices. There's some protocols being developed for payment via things like text messages. So even people on non-smartphones actually can send money back and forwards. So there's lots of things like this at the moment.
But do you think
practically everyone has a phone of some sort now?
Yeah. So you think it'll go to phones or devices rather than to plastic cards? Do you think plastic cards are going to kind of phase out?
I think so. I mean, I'm sure someone will develop these things, but I'd prefer to see a native application rather than leveraging Visa and MasterCard.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree with that as well. So does Bitcoin Cash, to your knowledge, have any, are they spearheading any initiatives in that area?
Well, I don't know, but no, not so much Bitcoin Cash, because that's the whole protocol and community. But yeah, there are, there's a guy called Vinamani who is doing a SMS transfer application at the moment, and they're developing that. That sort of thing is exciting.
That's a game changer. Massive game changer.
So that means you send an SMS message and there's your money. That'll open up many areas in places like Kenya and things like this.
Totally, yeah.
Then there are CentB, who we're investing in down in South Africa. They have a simple wallet. Very much like a Facebook type app. You have a picture of the person, you do the normal communications with them, you can talk and do social things, and then send them money.
Yeah.
So, and you can then link it to the amounts and exchanges and things like this. there are a few other things that we'll be announcing and helping develop this year. We've got another competition coming up for point of sales. One of the things we want to do is link derivatives and Bitcoin Cash directly, so that things like a bull spread can be linked to a purchase. What that enables is a merchant then to, rather than accepting Bitcoin Cash and having the volatility, they will, as soon as they get any transaction in Bitcoin Cash, have an instant payment or transfer of an option, allowing them to have a maximum downside.
Okay, that's tricky.
So, yeah, so the idea will be that there will be matched derivatives. The whole point of derivatives is to do this, but if we can automate it the same way that dark pool traders and everything like that do their own trading and derivatives right now,
right?
But we can make that a mainstream function. Use derivatives for what they were really intended to do, limit risk. Then why not take Bitcoin Cash? If you know your maximum loss is 3%, but your maximum gain is 20%, then that's a good thing.
Yeah. Thanks for answering that question.
Cool. Anybody else? Yep. A TX Highway guy right here, Craig.
Mm-hmm. The Bitcoin ABC released the roadmap and said that on the 15th of February, which is today, here now,
yes.
Log in the updates for what's going to happen. Do you have any idea what those updates will be, or?
I know Steve and other people in one of my teams has been working very hard on getting opcodes in. We've been working and we have submitted binary and string operations. So our focus has been re-enabling the binary and string operations first of all, which have been disabled. The plan isn't to get everything re-enabled in one go. It's to do it safely. So they've not only produced code that has been heavily tested internally through multiple groups. I mean, we've got a fair size organization now, and we've been able to not only have the people develop it, but then go off to separate internal test groups and all the rest. But we've created test scripts and other such things so that we can actually do much better than the original code was and re-enable what was intended. So that will be things like opmod, opxor, opand, opor, and then things like opcat and the concatenation and sort of division of strings. That allows you to do many of the things that people have argued you need a sidechain for. So things like mast that have been one of the big things that Blockstream have been running around saying we need sidechains because we can do this. Well, no, you don't. We can do it on Bitcoin Cash natively. So all those things you've been saying you can do, hopefully after May, we'll just be able to do. If you want to start developing things, great, go for it.
Cool.
My question, sorry. Any idea if they're going to raise the block size or remove it altogether for the May update, or that's going to be later on?
There is a proposal for adaptive block size. I'm not sure where that's at. And there's also the block size will be increased to 32 gig. Sorry, meg, not gig. So I prefer the other. I'd prefer just removing it, to tell you the truth, because the reality is miners aren't going to complain. If you consider that for a half-cent transaction, the cost of any transaction now is 1/10 of that to the miner on average. So even a 1% miner, the cost of hard drive and network space means that to flood the network pays the miner money. There's no way you can actually effectively attack the network by flooding it now. it is in the miner's interest to go out there and buy hard drives. So,
all right. Any other questions? Yep.
I think it's very interesting what you said before with the derivatives. Is that something that your company is particularly working on? Is that what
it's not particularly what we're working on. It's one of the many things. We've got, I have no idea what the actual number that is officially filed is. We've got between 150 and 200 filed patents at the moment, all that are starting to become patent and viewable. Sorry? To do with Bitcoin and the blockchain, yeah. I think there's only one that's not directly related to that. We have probably 500-600 in the list, but it takes time to develop, and we've only got so many lawyers that we can have working on this, and our law firms had to put extra people on already, so.
Yeah. Cool.
There's always bottlenecks. So, what's happening?
I'm hugging in.
G'day, Craig. Excuse my ignorance, as I'm relatively new to this space, but I find it fascinating and I'm learning every day. Look, I'm curious, what is Bitcoin Cash's idea of success? Is it ultimately dethroning Bitcoin and being the predominant cryptocurrency, the go-to cryptocurrency of the people, or does it see itself kind of working alongside all of the other cryptocurrencies?
The first part is, I don't believe when money competes properly that there'll ever be more than one. If people can choose, then there might be some strange little use case monies, but that's about the reality of it. I'll actually say a different thing than what you've said. I don't want to see it as the predominant cryptocurrency or anything like this. I want to see it as the predominant currency. I want to see it as the system that runs tokens for the world, that runs stocks for the world, that runs derivatives for the world. I want to see this as the financial plumbing of the entire globe. I want to see central banks have to use Bitcoin Cash, whether they like it or not. I want to see governments having to use Bitcoin Cash, whether they like it or not. I want to see normal banks using it. I want to see derivatives. I want to see people accessing their vehicle because of Bitcoin Cash. So,
does that answer?
So does that,
Yep.
but does that defeat the idea of competition though? And it's sort of even playing field but unequal outcomes. Does that defeat the idea of competition, or is the ultimate ideal of competition to destroy all competition?
Good question.
So I missed the first part of that, sorry.
Might have to come close again.
Sorry, the old crank up the back. No, I was just thinking, you're saying that, and look, I understand they have high ideals for Bitcoin Cash as being a dominant currency, but does that destroy the ideal of competition and other currencies having a place in the market and all that sort of thing? Or, like the Chinese guy that doesn't play basketball, he might be a genius, or he could be a great violin player, he could be really good at something else. Is there a space for him, or is there a space for other currencies?
If what we're doing works, I don't see a place for other currencies, no. I see a place for things within Bitcoin Cash. Does that mean, what people then think is this becomes only Bitcoin Cash the way it is right now. What I would see is hundreds of competing wallet implementations.
Right.
Sub-levels of mining. So within a script, you can do things like having a hash puzzle in a script, meaning that you can have a token that requires a sub-mining algorithm. For instance, you could use a Wright MD160 hash and say that it needs to be larger than X or smaller than X or between a certain value, which means people then have to submine and send that back before the script is valid, meaning that you can have transactions that require mining themselves and external verification.
And that is a competitive process.
Exactly. And all of this happens then not outside of in a fragmented area, but the way Bitcoin should have been in the first place. Ethereum should never have existed.
Right.
Not because Ethereum is bad, but because the idea was something that should have been within Bitcoin. People like Luke Jr. and things saying, that's all spam, that's bad. It is not. This is why Bitcoin exists. Not so that we can fragment into a million different things. Together we're strong. If we want to eventually take on and replace basically the world's currencies and change everything, then we're not going to do it with a million different altcoins.
Right.
Eventually there has to be something that actually becomes the dominant form. Not the centralized form, the dominant form.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think they'll put a mark, like the barrier to entry to actually creating a cryptocurrency will, like, you know, raise to the point where there will be no more cryptocurrencies being produced? Or do you think it will just be through efficiency, like Buckminster Fuller said, you know, you build a better system, it'll, you know, then everyone's going to use that. That's the way to destroy an old system, is build a much better system that everyone's going to adopt. Is that sort of the ideal of Bitcoin Cash?
Fairly much, yes.
So, Craig, just are you able to speculate on time horizons? Because it seems like the fragmentation and not having proof of concept, smart contracts on Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin has slowed progress in global decentralization and digital cash. So are you able to speculate or provide some sort of roadmap as to when we'll start to see these things? Because that seems to be holding back a lot of commerce. If you look at, say, for example, there's a decentralized rendering blockchain coming out called Render Token, which I think is going to be very powerful. But they're creating their own tokens to run that system, whereas they could be using Bitcoin Cash if it was at that level yet, but it's not. So I'm wondering when we're going to start to see proof of concepts and actual commerce taking place on this system.
After May, we will have enough opcodes to do practically everything. After November, we'll have most of the rest. From there, the creation of all sorts of things will start. So this year is going to provide the underlying layers and technology and re-enable things that have been broken and disabled. Some of the changes in the protocol, the way that integers are handled have been really screwed up, which has been about keeping things small. Why the hell people think that was necessary, I don't know, but that's what it has been. It used to be that when you did mathematics in Bitcoin, it could overflow, it could go negative, it could do a whole lot of things that have been restrained. Instead of actually building the system so that you can handle numbers like every other computer on earth has done, what they've done is just broken them and said, well, you can never, if it's bigger than this, then it's broken. If it's negative, it's broken. If it's this way, it's broken, which is a really, really stupid way of doing things. The reality is you understand that when you multiply numbers and they're larger than 32 bits, you have to find a way of handling them. And that's what should have been done. That's what we're going to redo. Once all that starts, then everything changes. So we're putting out a lot of competitions this year, which we're basically going to license intellectual property that we've been creating freely. There's a lot of other things happening that will be coming up this year. There are already partnerships with companies like SBI and others in Japan. And the creation of threshold-enabled wallets will happen this year. The creation of blinded peer exchanges will happen this year. And with those sort of technologies,
Craig, can you just
able to help.
for those who don't know what blinded exchanges are, or?
With a blinded transaction, it enables us to have something like a Coinbase that is no longer a money handler. Because Coinbase won't actually know what your balance is. They won't know what your keys are. They won't know what your transaction is. So if the IRS, like they did, comes and goes over to Coinbase and says, hand me all the information, they will be able to. And all they will know is Alice made 137 transactions this year. And Coinbase will be queried and say, what transactions are they? And they'll go, we don't know. And the IRS will go, how much did she transfer? We don't know. What addresses did she transfer to? We don't know. Now, that enables the creation of web wallets that are completely secure, that you no longer need to worry about someone running off with your keys because they don't know what your keys are. They have a blinded key. They can aid in the signature and they can back up and protect your information, allowing for the creation of simpler wallets. But they don't actually have custodial control of your keys at any point.
Cool. Craig, I know we kind of have gone over time. How are you for time?
I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just continue on then, maybe up until around 8. All right.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So we have an extra half hour with Craig Wright. Welcome. Look at that, Craig.
Hi, Mr. Craig. Hi, I've just got a question. Just, you know, it came to my mind right now about the blockchain, and you're actually the person, you and your team, who make the system, right? The Bitcoin. And I just got a question that, like, about the blockchain.
There's not a team. There's the ABC team. There's a Bitcoin Unlimited team. There's Bitprim. There's nChain. There's CoinGeek. We're one of many teams who all run around as cats in different directions.
I mean, the person like you make this idea, but what my question is the blockchain, and which means, is the blockchain the system that can't be hacked, right? So, and just, I'm not an English native speaker, so my sentence maybe like not right, but I'll try to explain. Is that did you also, I mean, you and your team make the blockchain, or that was existed like for already a long time? Is that the system you make, and that, you know what I mean?
Can try to translate. I think he's just talking about how Bitcoin was built on leveraging blockchain technology. So I think he's asking about just blockchain tech.
Yeah, well, the Bitcoin built on the blockchain system, right? Where the blockchain came from.
The idea of a blockchain isn't actually new, like everyone thinks. It's just obscure. It goes back nearly 20 years. I pointed out in one of the other interviews how there was a book that actually detailed some of this, and it was ideas that were floating around in the late 90s. The only real difference with a hash chain that didn't exist was the economics. So the integration of economics to the system was the difference. I've been, if you read any of my old papers that are still out there somewhere, pushing sort of security as an economic function for a long time, which I think a lot of techies always hated me for that one, because they like to think you can make perfect sort of security. I had a run-in back in the early 90s with Marcus Raynham, because Marcus used to have this poster saying the ultimate firewall, and he'd say a pair of pliers, because you can cut the line and no one can get in. And my comment was, one, there's no such thing as a bloody air gap. For all you know, someone's got a wireless dongle in the back of that damn machine and you just left the attacker, but stopped being able to manage it. And two, you have just actually done the attack. You have DOSed your own system and stopped your business. So basically, this idea of cutting the cable is the stupidest techie idea. We're secure because no one can get in. No one can make money. If you're Amazon and you're going, oh, bugger, someone's attacking my system, I'll just turn off. Business. I mean, I used to sit in conferences in the 90s and be called an idiot for this because people were sitting there going, yeah, but you need to be secure. It was the old military mentality. We'll just turn everything off. I remember I used to contract with DFAT and other Australian entities there. And Department of Treasury had a risk profile back in the 90s where they were going to have a DDoS attack. And we mentioned how they needed to ramp up and do things to protect their network. Their answer, being a typical Australian government entity, is between November and January, because that's downtime anyway, they turned the computers off for 3 months and just stopped paying other government entities, stopped doing everything. They just said they can't DDoS us because we've disconnected.
Nice move.
So if you think about that, I mean, they DOS themselves so that they can't be DDoSed. Yay.
All right, thanks a lot.
You might have gone a bit off path there, Craig, but
Craig, I'm also quite relatively new to this whole thing.
can you hear him, Craig?
Sort of in and out, it's breaking up a little bit.
Everybody probably need to come here.
Sorry. I'm also relatively new to this whole space, but I'm just a bit intrigued with what you were saying earlier in terms of Bitcoin Cash will be able to handle everything and the need for Ethereum. Now, Ethereum runs smart contracts, dApps, all that sort of stuff. Bitcoin Cash, as far as I'm aware, doesn't. You're suggesting that all that will be able to run on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain at some future.
Yes.
And then there's other, I guess, blockchain networks that perform a function like, I'll give you an example, I don't know, ICX, for instance, which is, taking a big sort of, thing in South Korea that serves a particular purpose and a function, and I don't particularly use that myself as a cryptocurrency because I don't believe it's a currency and I don't trade it to pay things. So I think that certain blockchains exist as blockchains, and the token is basically the investment in that particular company or in that particular protocol or that particular technology. So,
most of what we have now is speculation. It is, we believe that one day one of these will be worth lots of money, so we're going to put a little bit of money everywhere and hope that something goes up.
And I believe that is the case with Bitcoin Cash right now because, unfortunately,
that's the case with all of them right now.
That's with everything, yeah, because nothing is really embedded in our everyday life, nor is there some sort of a reserve or whatever that controls that whole system. And I don't know whether that'll ever exist, but it's going to be quite interesting because you're saying there's no need for Coinbase, but you can't move your fiat over, and there's got to be some sort of transition at some point.
I didn't say there's no need for Coinbase. I said there was a way of making a better Coinbase.
Yeah. So, we need to integrate into everything is going e-commerce. We need more integration in e-commerce. I understand Roger, our good old mate, bought 500 ATMs and, that's a good start, but there's millions and millions
We have quite a few competitions this year. We have gone over our options. We had one where we could try and become Google, and we don't really want to do that. That would mean I have to actually start becoming nicer and a people person, and
That's never going to work, Rick.
that ain't going to work. So that would mean I'd have to do like Facebook does and try and actually polish myself up like Mark Zuckerberg did. And, nah. So we're going a completely different way. Where like the competitions that ourselves and CoinGeek and other that we've made little partnerships with will start giving technology out. So we're going to develop technology and then hand it to other people to build. And one of those is POS solutions, point of sale. And there'll be some different POS solution competitions this year. And we'll be offering decent sized bounties. They'll be 5 million US. So we've already had 3 different bounties of about 5 million given out. And there's more coming. So we're going to develop an ecosystem.
You're developing it, but how do you benefit from it, Craig? Like, I mean, you're making the world a better place, but I mean, there's got to be some sort of...
Our group, we have an underwear gnome strategy.
You got to be...
Which I keep saying. Number 1, collect Bitcoin. We've already done that. Number 2, stuff, which is all the competitions and things. Number 3, profit. Bitcoin goes up in value, we make money. It's very simple. So if we make a global economy, then we're better off anyway. So it's an unusual scenario. We can hand things out and give things away and throw money at people and make more back.
There's going to be a price event with Bitcoin Cash.
And just one final question. You know, Roger isn't really the most liked person out there these days. You're pretty good. I don't mind you. I also don't mind Roger.
Well, thank you.
I think he's got a set of balls on him. But you know, this whole sort of the whole people sort of not liking a personality, and there's always a personality behind the Bitcoin Cash brand. But does it not hurt the narrative, or you think it's just going to...
We will probably, if we have, say, 10 competitions on 10 different areas, and out of that, there'll be some winners, and even then, some of the losers will have decent technology that maybe we'll invest in. So even if they lose, there's potential that they might get round A funding, because we're now vulture capitalists as well. Got to stop saying vulture, but I've got a long history of calling them vulture capitalists. So even now that I'm a vulture capitalist in a way, I'll keep calling them vulture capitalists. Over time, as that might be 30 different groups of companies developed this year. With 30 different groups of companies this year and then more next year, then it won't just be Craig and Roger and Jihan and things like that. As we start developing more, with people like SBI in Japan getting in, with other groups in Korea getting in, with Samsung getting into the act, I mean, then it changes. It's no longer about us, the personality. It's then all these competing companies. So then you can hate me and hate Roger and love SBI and whatever else.
So you probably should just sell all Satoshi's coins and move them all into Bitcoin Cash then.
Next question. Yeah.
Craig, it's just building on some of the previous points that were made around Ethereum. There's obviously a whole heap of businesses that are attaching to the Ethereum blockchain at the moment. And going to create quite an ecosystem.
Are they?
There seems Hank, bear with me. There seems to be a risk here for Bitcoin Cash that's developing its own ecosystem, because first mover advantage, and you know, look at the likes of eBay and Uber and other companies that
MySpace.
that platform, and you know, created a network effect and have dominated. You know, is it what I'm trying to get at is it too little, too late for Bitcoin Cash that perhaps is a bit, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps a little bit behind the curve compared to Ethereum?
You mean like Yahoo and Friendster and
Yeah, so yeah, right. Like Google came late to the search engine party, right?
yeah, Alta Vista. Everyone, I was at the launch of Alta Vista. That was really cool. First search engine, yeah. So let's see, what does Ethereum do other than crypto kitties and crypto pussies? Let's see, we have ICOs. What are they really offering? I mean, at the moment, it is a token to be a security that is not a security until they crack down on it, which is going to happen in the next year or two. Basically, these are already illegal security offerings for the most part. Whether you like it or not, Ethereum ICOs are registered sort of securities, except they're not registered. In some places, they're effectively criminal actions. You've got more than a certain number of investors. You can say that they're not securities, but who cares? I mean, arguing with the government, I've done that one before, it doesn't work. The government says what they want, and you can say what you want, and they've got the guys with guns.
All right, thanks for the question.
Greg, what are your thoughts on proof-of-stake cryptocurrencies and their argument of lowering power costs in mining and all that?
That's a typical nChain version of Bitcoin cannot scale, because if we have a 1 meg block, we only have this number of transactions, so therefore it costs too much. But it costs just as much if we're sending around terabyte sized blocks. I mean, running a hard drive is running a hard drive, running a network is running a network. And the reality is the power costs go down as you increase the number of transactions. Now, proof of stake, well, the reality is what it is proof of oligarchy. Now, I make this sort of example of things all the time. If you earn $45,000 a year and have a family, the amount you save is minuscule. That's why they have super and all this sort of stuff. If you earn $450,000 a year, even after the government takes a big chunk of it, you can save a lot of money. Someone on a $450,000 salary can save $100,000 a year if they really want to, and have a family and have a decent life. Now, someone on $45,000 a year might struggle to save $1,000 a year after school costs and everything like that. So you've gone up 10 times the earning, but 100 times the saving. That's something that people don't seem to understand. When you have more money, you can have more money sitting idle. And voting in proof of stake comes down to how much money you can put idle. So it's not the same. I mean, this idea that lots of people will be able to vote small amounts. Lots of people won't be able to vote small amounts, because that means taking your money out of circulation for a time. Proof of stake means people who have to pay the bills, their rent, their school fees, their petrol, their everything else, their groceries, have to decide not to vote, eat for the month so they can make a vote. That's not going to happen. Someone with a lot of wealth, someone who has a lot of money sitting in the bank, can go, oh, well, I would like to vote to double the amount of coins I have, because that would be nice. And so it's a completely different system. It's really a system that favors those with more money making more money. it centralizes to an oligarchy.
Thanks, Craig. So just feeding back to your question, to one of the earlier questions around the longer term vision, you might like a step back, and it kind of seems like this would be equivalent to the separation of money and state, as opposed to the separation of church and state. And so if we look at central banks and all the incumbents right now, and in order for such a movement to take place, and so many current parties that are in power, in order to be like reorganized into the future state, I guess my question is, how can this happen in the most optimal and least friction or least kind of violent way possible? Because it does seem like a pretty major reorganization of power in society. So just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Before the end of the 1920s, with the increase of state control, before the Fed in its current implementation was introduced in America, there wasn't really much interaction in American sort of politics to the economy. It happened, they mucked around with things like changing gold and silver and moving the goalposts a little bit. And that resulted in the normal boom-bust cycles, which of course happen. I mean, people blame many things, but don't realize that, for instance, when you have pegged gold and silver, one of the things that happened back with the cross of gold and all the rest sort of things, arguments in America, was suddenly big silver deposits were found. And the valuation of gold and silver changed by something like 130%, meaning that booms and busts happened. People who had one or the other suddenly flipped. But they were rather quick. I mean, what people don't get is the depressions of the late 1800s and the late 1900s, early 1900s were very quick. They happened 6 months and a year, and everything was sorted, and everyone bitched for 6 months and said, oh, the government's got to step in. And then things were just working and they moved on. And then we get to a period where the government did step in, the Hoover period and then the Roosevelt period and whatever else. And instead of everything sorting itself out in 6 months to a year, a decade later it was still going on. So what we're going back to, hopefully, is a scenario where people will jump up and down and complain and go, oh, the economy's so bad because widget X company is now out of business. The government's got to save us. And that will be normal, but the government won't have the control of the monetary supply that they once had. We'll start realizing that it's a global economy.
Okay. Wait. Oh, sorry. Just so you know, because we're getting to 8 o'clock, we'll have 2 more questions.
Yep.
One quick question. Do you think there is going to be a price event with Bitcoin Cash?
Oh, there's always price events.
Yep. One more question, Craig.
Last question.
Yeah, my question can be silly, but I just wondering if the cryptocurrency in the future, in a really close future, can be controlled by the government. Like, is there any chance about that?
There's a chance when we have a world government where all governments get together and the lion and the lamb lay together, and suddenly all the governments go, let's all be friends and we'll control the world. And as soon as that happens, cryptocurrency can be controlled.
So it means it actually depends on us, on people, right?
Everything depends on people.
The lion and the lamb sleep together, but the lamb doesn't get a lot of sleep, right?
Exactly. And the lamb may not be there in the morning either.
All right, Craig, thank you for your time, guys. Can you give a round of applause for Craig?
Thank you.
Hi, Craig. Yeah, thank you for your time, man. And last one from me, and actually from everybody. So what's up with the suited armor in the background?
Oh, well, I live in a English country house, so I'm got to have the weird English country house adornments.
All right, Craig. Thanks for everything you do, man. We'll speak soon.
All right. See you later.
See you in Tokyo.
Will
About a month.
do.
Hi, man. See ya.
All right. Catch you later.
All right. Stop that.